Good morning or afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Fostering Effective Communication in a Modern Workforce, presented by Dr. J. Pugh. I'm going to give us about 30 more seconds to get a couple people into the webinar, but other than that, I'll go over a little quick intro on Dr. J. Pugh. Today, we're going to dive into how to adjust your management style to successfully improve communication, foster connections, increase productivity, and develop highly successful teams. Dr. Jay Pugh, Vice President of Center for Leadership and Development at New Horizons, will discuss how to understand your own power in message delivery and how to adapt your communication type to thinking styles and needs of others. Whether you are a seasoned communicator or just getting started, this is the perfect opportunity for anyone looking to apply better dialogue with others and communicate at the next level. New Horizons is excited to present this webinar today, and now I will hand it over to you, Dr. J.
Hey, thank you so much, and I appreciate everybody being a part of this. As they mentioned, my name is Dr. J. Pugh. I serve as our Vice President of the Center for Leadership and Development within New Horizons. And so a little bit about me that I always like to mention, I have been living in this hybrid space. I've been living in this modern workforce and teaching and doing research in it for the last probably 8 years in this space, even pre-COVID. And so I do have a PhD in this space. I have a book in this space. I live and breathe this space. So this is a huge passion of mine. I will say that even helping my daughters, I have 4 daughters, and even helping them navigate this modern workforce with their school even makes a little bit of a challenge. And so how do we navigate it? How do we understand it? And how do we sort of move through it more effectively? And so I'd like for us to be able to use the chat today. That's going to be one of the key areas I'd like for us to direct our attention to. And I want us to think about this for a moment. I want you to think, what benefits exist currently for working in hybrid or virtual teams? What are the roadblocks that currently exist? I want you to take a moment and I want you to type in the chat. What are some things that really you run into when you're finding benefits or roadblocks with managing or working in remote and virtual teams? Oh, I'm seeing time clashes. Absolutely, Brandon. Love that. Yes, you've multitasking, distractions, engagement. Look at this. Couldn't agree more. Oh, man, we have everything coming in from one-on-one dialogue. There's benefits where it's more accessible. It's a little bit more friendly. There's more technology to be able to work with people with maybe that have disabilities. There's ways that we can work around different schedules. We're missing that human interaction is one of the big things I'm seeing. And we are missing some physical cues from time. Who owns things? I like that from Lennis, so sort of who owns things as we're navigating this. I think all of this has a lot of merit. And I always like to mention this because as we're going through and understanding the advantages and disadvantages, it really is critical for us to understand, how do we get people to truly fully engage in a world that doesn't necessarily allow the 3D engagement to occur. And so I really like this. And I'm seeing things from, that communication is driven in body language and we miss those pieces. Absolutely is all of those things. I'm going to give a little bit of a holistic thing. And I like what Jacqueline said about sometimes we assume technology works the same for everybody. And one of the key rules that I love here, Jacqueline, that we teach in a lot of our courses is what is clear to us is not always clear to others. And so that is a huge piece in coming in, is that we find what it is that we're comfortable with, but then are we really being mindful of the other in the way that we approach? So I'm going to share a few benefits, roadblocks along the way. I will tell you that as far as where remote or virtual or hybrid teams come into play, one of the advantages that comes into play is flexibility. There's a lot more flexibility in the approaches, a lot less commute. There's a little bit more flexibility in a schedule in a day. So those things provide a little bit more comfort in the movement. That's actually one of the reasons that whenever there was a survey provided in the most recent Gallup poll, does anybody know what the percentage of people that do not want to go back 100% full-time is? Keep raising that number up even more. They don't mind a hybrid workforce. It is 97.5%. That is exactly right. They're okay. Many people are okay with saying, hey, I don't mind going into the office 1 day or 2 days a week because they do miss that human connection and they do miss that connectivity. At the same time, as far as being competitive in a global workforce, many people, one of the requirements they look for is what policies do you have as a hybrid policy? The number is astronomical. And the reason why is because they've gotten a taste of what that flexibility looks like. However, there are definitely some challenges and roadblocks that come into play also. Number one, and the most significant one, is out of sight, out of mind mentality. I'll give an example. If there was an issue that happened in the office and you heard somebody on the phone or you heard somebody talking and you sense their frustration, you could immediately go up and know exactly what it is. It created sort of that reactive mindset. The challenge of that is, well, I can't see or hear that anymore. So how do I make sure that people are okay? So this out of sight, out of mind mentality has really caused a significant downturn in the way that we proactively communicate. And so because of this, it's caused things like lack of engagement, lack of productivity at times, because the world has gotten smaller, but it's gotten slower. So how do we sort of stay on top of it? How do we sort of maximize this? And so in this case, from Long Distance Leader, this is a book by Eikenberry and Turmel. I'm a huge fan of their work. And one thing they always say is you shouldn't lose your leadership and management practices first. That should be the primary focus. Location should be second. And what that means is that if typically at 11 o'clock in the morning, you would make your circles and go check on people and make sure everybody's okay, that's still a good time for you to say, hey, I want to check in people, just make sure everybody's doing okay. So that should still be the priority. The second piece of this is you really have to know what your leadership style is and know exactly the way that your people prefer to communicate. The third biggest challenge is sometimes we get all these shiny new technology toys and then we go, we can't wait to use it. Well, then we look at things like Salesforce and we look at things like Teams. And as great as they are, if there's not tools or standards that are built into these technological pieces, we end up missing the boat. So because of this, I want to teach you a couple things on how to flip this back on its axis. Before I do that, I want to talk about, obviously, with the pandemic, I know people get a little bit tired of that because we've gone through some things. At the same time, I do want to give a little bit of a workforce component on what's happened. What has happened is this. We've run into situations where people were building relationships in the workplace. Everybody was comfortable with who they worked with. There was those dynamics that were already there. And then what happened is the pandemic hit and it forced us straight into survival mode. It forced us into GSD, if you will. Anybody know what GSD is? If you do, you can type it in the chat. GSD, if you're already laughing or smiling, you're my kind of people. Forced us into I love it, Kelly. It forced us into get stuff done mode, if you will. Yes, it has. It forced us into get stuff done. Because there was survival and business and things going on, it forced us into the get stuff done mentality. And what we have to do as hybrid in this modern workforce is we have to flip it back on our axis. We have to start setting the foundation for relationship management first before we get to communication management and then functional management. What we have a tendency to do is we want to make sure that everybody's getting their work done and are they being productive and are they doing this? But what's happening is we're spending so much time in that people are becoming disengaged in the work that they're doing. That's the challenge that we're finding. And so when people are becoming disengaged in the work they're doing, it's starting to create less relationship management, which then is turning a downturn in productivity. So how on earth do we do this? Well, I'm going to give you the Dr. J special of what we call focusing on people's VIPs. I'm a huge proponent of this. This is something I've really coined that I've found to be truly beneficial in the way we work with other people. And what VIPs stand for is values, interests, and preferences. I will repeat that. It is values, interests, and preferences. And so when we talk about values and interests and preferences, what that really means is, number one, do you know what your people value? And so when it comes to value, one of the first things that come in is, do they value saving time? Do they value making time? Do they value things like integrity? Do they value things like kindness? Do they value things like logic and process? What is it that they value? And think about this. If you're probably married, you probably know this about your significant other. And at the same time, we even run into those things too. And I'll give it a key example here. I genuinely like a lot of people. I promise you I do when I say this. But if you had to ask me, the more efficient you can be with me, I will be your best friend. If you can save me time, I will be your best friend. That is a key value of mine, is efficiency. Now, how many of you are like, oh, I know those kind of people, but I'm definitely a make time person? Let me ask this question, doing a quick understanding in the chat. Are you a save time person or a make time person? Which means I would prefer it if you save me time versus, hey, no, I want you to make me time. I want you to make time for me. There we go. And we're seeing quite a mixture coming in. We're seeing save time, make time. This is a perfect example of values. This is a key thing. Ready for this? And I mean this on the blunt scale, on the blunt honesty scale. On a scale of 1 to 10, in the way you would want honesty, would you want it 10 being unfiltered and raw and potentially, don't want to say hurtful, but as tough as possible? I like that Wendy's already like, give me the 10. Or to 1, which is really about vulnerability, about being really kind with our feedback, being very understanding with our honesty. And this is what I like to see. You can tell there is no wrong answer to this, folks, just so you know. There is no wrong answer, but these are values, are they not? So here's the thing. If I'm talking to Samantha and Samantha prefers kindness in dialogue, and I'm somebody that's like, Samantha, I need you to ramp up that honesty with me. That means, and like Jacqueline says, she's from New York. I'm from Pittsburgh. You bring it as tough as possible. That's what I want. That's going to be a potential value we have to understand in each other. So the first thing I'd like for you to do is really map out their values. What does each person on your team value? That's the first thing. The second thing that we have to pay attention to is, what are they interested in? What are they interested in? Are they interested in things like data, analysis, numbers, charts, visuals? Are they interested in collaboration, teamwork, dialogue, interconnectivity? Are they involved in the space of mission, vision, principle, integrity? Are they interested in making sure that, I hate to say this, but even autonomy? Those are things we have to know. What do they like to talk about to get them motivated? Are they people ready for this? Here's a key thing. Here's the game I like to play with the interest. Who's ready for this one? Give me a thumbs up if you're like, I'm ready for this one. We're going to play a little game here. Are you a? Loving the enthusiasm. Ready? Are you a, how was your weekend person? Or please don't ask me about how my weekend was. I love it. Look, this is perfect. And some people go, I like that some people are like, depends. It depends on maybe if I'm busy. It depends on who may be asking. That is really huge, right? And so that's what I want us to understand, is that that's also an interest. I will tell you this. I love my girls with every fiber of my being, right? And Michelle, the way she just said this is exactly how it is. If I want you to know, I'll tell you. You don't have to ask me. That's typically how I would view it. Once again, that doesn't make me right or others, but we have to understand. We have to understand where that starts to come in on the other side. And that's a good point too, Lynette, is sometimes with HR, we have to keep that a little bit more guarded in that space because we don't want to be judged because once again, it's a difficult dynamic there. So with interest, I'll tell you things that I get into with dialogue. I'll share a funny story. I have about 43 salespeople that talk to me regularly, and then I have 11 facilitators. What do you think the likelihood that the question that starts every dialogue is, how are the girls? How are the girls doing? How are the girls? How are the girls? Right? 4 daughters, how are the girls? And Brandon, you just nailed it. And sometimes I got so much going on in my mind that, and I won't say this to them, but my first inclination is there's a lot of them. What do you need? Right. And so that's where, once again, we have to pay attention to the interest of what people want to communicate. And that's the key thing, Douglas, is we have to be mindful of our segues to interest. We have to really be focused in on what's a segue that they're really interested in. Because here's the thing, if you talk to me about sports, I might take a moment. If you talk to me about that, I might shift. And so that's what we have to find is what is it that gets them to perk up a little bit? And that's a good point too, Michelle. And so that's where I want us to be mindful of what it is that A, we value, and B, what are we interested in? The last piece, and this is by far my favorite, is preferences. This one is going to shock you a little bit. And I want you to think about this for a minute. Do you know what your peak times and weak times are? And what I mean by peak times is this. I have what's called and this is where we talk about this with social batteries. So this is a big thing with social batteries. And I'll give an example. I am somebody that my battery is like an iPhone. I charge it every night. I make sure that it's at 100% in the morning. I am ready to go at 6, 7 a.m. And if you message me at 5 p.m., my brain is mush. My brain is mush. And Len, this is a great question. I'm going to get to that question. And if we can we, Mariella, can we make sure that that's a question we discuss on what do you do when the one-on-one goes through them? Because we are going to discuss that. I want to get into that. But in the meantime, I want us to focus on our times because, and Stacy mentions the battery A, just so you know, is like this. It starts hot, and then by the end of the day, it just runs out of steam. It just starts to go, I'm not at my peak. So if you schedule a 4 p.m. meeting with me, I'm out. There's other people that prefer to, and I'll give you this. How many of you are please don't speak to me until I've had my coffee? Let me get my coffee, which basically means let me get my ramp up. Let me get through the first hour or two of my day, and then I would be happy to speak to you. And now we're talking. There we go. And so, and now ready for this? How many of you are afternoon? How many of you are afternoon people? I saw a couple people that were there already. Let me get through my morning because then it's all downhill from there and I'm ready to roll. And this is where, and Nadine, we're going to talk about that in just a moment. So here's the thing. Some people have batteries like engines. You got to let them rev up. You got to let them rev up. And Eileen, I'm not a coffee drinker as well. I know all that fun we were just having, and it's like, boo that man, boo. I understand. I'm not a coffee drinker. That's why I tend to shut down getting closer to 4:30. Some people, their batteries are like engines. They need to rev up. They need to rev up. So you got to give them some room to really get moving. And then there's other people that their batteries are basically like, if you're that person that says, I love people no matter what, they have what's called an interaction-based battery. And what that means is that you have to check in with them before meeting with them. Hey, how's your day going? Because then if they're like, I'm great, I just had the best call ever. Hey, you got a few minutes to meet? Let's talk. I want to make sure that we're in good places. Or, hey, do you know what? No, I just had a really rough call. Hey, no worries. Why don't we touch base a little bit later? That's an interaction-based battery. So you really have to pay attention to what people's peak times and weak times are. What are their social batteries? So are you a battery A to where, look, you're sharp in the morning and it just starts to decline and decline and decline as it goes? And once you're at the end of the day, you're like, I'm spent. Are you somebody that likes to rev up some and give me a chance to rev up and then I'm going to be at my peak? Or are you somebody that's more of an interaction based battery, as we say, is C? Love what I'm seeing here. We've quite a mix. Very good. And I like that, Leslie. If we have a lot of conference calls, then it starts to go down. Very good. Excellent. I like this definition. Vroom, vroom, Mark. Excellent. Very good. And here's why I bring this up. And Eric, that's what I like is we learn that, oh no, our spouses might even be different. So that's perfect. This is where this comes into play. It's human interaction. And so that's why I bring this up is I want to make sure that we understand not only our own, but how many of you know your individuals on your teams? How many of you know the individuals on your teams? How many of you know their V's, their values, what they truly value and what they do? And I like that many of them go most of them, or you might say, hey, I got some, but I haven't had a chance. And there it is. And so now we go based on time. But this is where the next thing I want to teach you about is what is called the proactive check in. And I have to stress this, right? This is not meant to check up on anybody's work. This is the differentiation between what are you doing and how are you doing. And there's nothing wrong with just saying, hey, Edward, I just wanted to check in real quick and see how you were doing. And I just had a couple questions for you, man. And throw me under the bus. I just learned something. I kind of want to test this out. Talk to me, tell me what it is you value. Do you want me to kind of save you time? Do you want autonomy? Do you want me to check in with you? Talk to me about what that means. What do you like to talk about so that I'm not getting into the same repetitive mess every day? And what are your peak times and weak times? If you start doing that, then all of a sudden you really start connecting with people more naturally in this remote workforce. What are our thoughts on this? Pretty cool? Give me a thumbs up or a smiley face if you're like, I already learned something really cool right out the gate. As the great infomercials and Ron Popeil once so eloquently stated, but wait, there's more. And we're going to talk about engagement, Brandon. We actually have a couple courses that focus on that. That's going to be really important. So as we go in, I want us to think about this. How do you make sure that you have commitment and not compliance? What does engagement look like? This is a perfect question that Brandon asked, and that's why I love that he's leading us right into this direction. How do you know that your meetings are actually really engaging? How do you know? How do you know you've commitment and not compliance? They ask for feedback, interaction, the energy, responses. Boy, you really have to. So I like this, Charmaine. What is the difference between commitment and compliance? Compliance means they're willing to do the work. Commitment means they want to do it. They want to dive in. They're enthusiastic about the dive in. And this is where we're seeing great questions. They want to drive. They want to dive in, right? That's where it comes into play. It's a difference between being involved versus just being present. There's deeper discussions. There's generation of ideas. There's deeper participation. You're absolutely right. So how do we ensure, and that's exactly right. And that's a huge thing, Charmaine, is that's a great dialogue to have with them, is to say, hey, I really think we might need to calibrate. Are we compliant in this, or are we committed? Like, what is commitment? And I always love to ask the question, what does commitment look like to you? What does commitment look like to you? I love to ask them that question because it really goes into this space of saying, you know what? I want to make sure that I'm not wasting your time. I want to make sure that we're not doing something that is detrimental to the work that you're doing. So that's why I'm trying to make sure that there's commitment to this. And if there's not, I really want us to make sure that we can talk about it. And that's where what we call, in this case, there's a big difference between commitment and compliance. And I will say it comes down to one small acronym, and it's known as WIFM. Anybody know what WIFM is? WIIFM. That's it, Roderick. I love it. What's in it for me? That's it. What's in it for me that I get out of this that's going to be meaningful or productive or useful? What is in it for me? And that's really what engagement looks like, folks. And so whenever I talk about preparation, one of the things I like to discuss in preparation is I always make sure that my meetings have 4 different components to it. 4 different components. The first, and I like this, right? The first one is there are people, and you're going to start to see that there's these type of people that you work with that you're like, that's what they need to move. That's what they need to get to where they need to. And so I've broken this down in sort of the book. And anytime I focus my attention towards this, a lot of what I've delved into in the art of engagement is, and I want you to think about this for a second. I'm going to ask you all 2 quick questions. Are you all engaged? Number 1. On a scale of 1 to 10, how engaged are you in this dialogue? And the second question behind this, and we're seeing pretty high numbers. And here's the thing, even if the number is, you know what, it's about a 6 or a 7, that's okay. The question is, number 2 is, what is making this engaging? Think about this. What is making this engaging? Ah, I like Michelle's like, how could you not, right? Waiting for responses. There's interaction. There's breakdown of steps. There's more about leadership. There's energy. There's usable information. It speaks across the board. It's relevant. There's so many factors that come into this play. I love this. There's active listening. There's waiting for the responses. So I want to make sure, and there's a vibe. I like that you're not reading a script. There's an interest. This is where I want to make sure of when it comes down to really preparing. I always make sure that I focus on what is called the CYA model of preparation. Now, if you're laughing at this, once again, you're my kind of people, because it kind of does that. It does cover your assets, if you will, right? But in this case, what CYA prepares you for is I prepare for my content. I prepare for myself in knowing the way that I can get people to move. And then what I do is I also prepare for my audience and what they need to thrive in this dialogue. So I prepare 3 different ways for dialogue. So for when we talk about content, I really try to make sure that I'm hitting all of my audiences up front with 4 different things. And you're going to start to understand that there's probably profiles of people that you're going to see and you're going to go, oh, that's my husband, or that's my wife, or you know what? I work with that person. You're going to see this. And the first type of thinker that goes into content needs analysis. They need the meat and potatoes. They need the real substance, if you will. That is what the great Lil Jon, the rapper of the world. Anybody know who Lil Jon is? Quick thumbs up if that's the case. There it is. Yeah. You could say, what? Yeah. They turn down for what? That's exactly right. They are the people that turn down for what? What information do I need to know? What data do I need to support it? What evidence do you have to back it up? What do I need? They are very much brass tacks, nuts and bolts. Give me what I need. And how many of you know somebody like that in the workplace? It could be somebody you work for. It could be somebody you work with. It could be somebody that works for you. They need that analysis. See, we know them. We know. And Jacqueline, I love Jacqueline that you're like, that's me. I want the brass tacks. I want the nuts and bolts. So this is where people like Jacqueline are going to pick this up and hop in. And what they're going to need in this case is they're going to dive into things like they want visuals, they want data, numbers, they want trends, they want charts, and they want evidence. And that's it, right? And that's it. Leslie, Jack, look, you're seeing this. Charmaine, like, I need the details. I need the nuts and bolts. Give me the facts. Give me the documents. Give me the information. That's what I need. That's what people. And so now you're already seeing that there's people engaging with this. Now, how many of you are like, and I like this. I like what I just saw here from Miss Delgado said, I'm partially like this. And she goes, now, how many of you are like, I like it, I want that, but that's not really what drives me? How many of you are that? That's where your mind's going. Now we're talking. And so now the next one that we talk about, because not everybody is Lil Jon. Some people are Backstreet Boys. Anybody know why? You got to tell me why. That's it. You got to tell me why. Ain't nothing but a heartache, right? You got to tell me why. And they do want it that way, Eric. That's exactly right. They want to know the greater why. They want to know the synthesis, the big picture, the mission, the vision. They want to know, right? And that's where people come in, is they want to say in this focus, they want to look at this and understand, you know what? I need to see the big picture. I need to see the mission and the vision. I need to know the outcome and the goals that are going to come out of this. I need to know the context. That's what they need. And so if we're not bringing in the greater why into dialogue, we're out. They're out. They need to know what the end game looks like. They need to know what the end game looks like. And that's what happens. You're right. And please don't, I don't want to mispronounce the name, but if it Yahira or Yahira, I don't want to mispronounce, but that is so true, is that some people, they don't care about the what. Yahira, thank you. And so they will not care about the what as much if they don't know the why. That's a huge piece. And that's the thing, is that we need, and you're right, Jacqueline, you're right, that we do want the why, we need the why, but there are some people that are like, my driving factor is the what. And some people, it's my driving factor is the why. And that's what I like that Brandon said is like, I would go to compliant here and not committed. And that's why we need all four of these to be brought in. Because you'll notice that there's some people that are like, I am probably compliant with the what, but I'm committed to the why. Or, and you're right, Lynette, is we can be all motivated by all four. What I want us to understand, though, is that when we talk about analysis and big picture, there's going to be some that may drive us to commitment a little bit more. I would say root cause analysis, because it falls into the past, Jacqueline, that would be what? Root cause analysis would fall more into the what, because it provides past. I would say, Carrie, is it Carrie or Kari? I don't want to mispronounce, but that's going to be where it's actually not a why thing. It's actually a who thing for them. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. Now, some people, Carrie, thank you. And so in this case, when we talk about, some people are driven not just by the why, but there's other people that are driven by the how. They are the great one-hit wonder. And if you get this one, you're going to be my definite best friend on this one. The great Montel Jordan in 1995 had a one-hit wonder, one of the best ones around. Anybody who know what it is? That's it, Angel. That's right. This is how we do it. That's what they need to know. They need to know this is how we do it. That means they want to know the methods. They want to know the procedure. They want to know the process. They want to know that's right, the party's on the west side. And so we want to know things like the process, the procedure. They want steps, numbered steps even. They like SOPs and protocols. The biggest thing that you can give them to be their best friend is give them a roadmap. Give them a roadmap. They are very present-minded thinkers. They want one, then two, then three, then four. How many of you know people that will not put the cart before the horse? I will not go to step 2 until I know step 1. I will not go to step 3. And there, and there it is. We're seeing senior engineers, or in this case, I married them. Exactly. That's where they come into play. And so we have to be mindful of that. Those are how thinkers. Those are how thinkers. So we have to have how built into our content. Now, a great question that was asked that was from Carrie. She asked, what about the why people on why do they have to do it? Or why does this actually help me or even others? Why does this help? Or that's not a why person. That's actually going to be a who person. Because that is going to be the great rock band, The Who. Because what they want to know is, who are you to tell me, number one, who are you to tell me, and who does this help include it, and does this help me include it? Now, I don't want anybody to think that this is selfish. It really is that pinball wizard, Wendy. I love it. It's getting to this idea of they want to know the actual impact. They want to know the impact. They want to know the interpersonal components going into it. They like quotes and stories. They like testimonials and feel goods. They are about the journey, not the destination. And I will say that if all of you are saying that, yes, I'm all for, yes, I'm all for, we all are all for. The trick is that there is something in there that drives us a little bit more, and gets us to perk up and gets us to focus in and gets us to drive. For some, it's the money. For others, it's the mission statement. For others, it's the results. For others, it's the process. That's where it is. And that's where I want us to identify that, because when we do this, you have this understanding of saying, hey, all 4 of these things I can get behind. And that's where the brain thinking comes into play. And it's everything we just talked about. The analytical thinker is nuts, bolts, hard facts, evidence, data, numbers, and they place value on the past and results. The conceptual is big picture, creativity, innovation, future, change, end goals. They like to take a risk. That they focus on the big picture. Then you have the procedurally minded people that are focused more on systems, process, implementation, order, structure, 1s, 2s, and 3s. They like reliability. And then you have the people that are all about the journey, not the destination, the interpersonal, the people, the relationships, impact, empathy. They value the relationships and the impact that happens. So what I'd like for you to have is this 4 square for components. Have this 4 square that drives into that anytime you're preparing your next dialogue, your next meeting, I want you to really make sure that all 4 boxes are checked when you do it. How many of you are going to make that happen? More importantly, in a deeper rooted question, what do you think that will do for your team? What do you think that will do for your team? And Mariella, I just got a request about slides, or if there's a couple people that have asked for slides, and that's where, just in case, I'm going to leave that to our marketing team. They can be able to take care of that as we move. I'm the one that just kind of presenting the show here as far as we go. And there are many meetings. All I like to do, Mark, this is a great question, is I always just like to make sure I have one of each, just one of each. So you don't have to build in all 5 of those, but I might just have in like a template as a slide deck that just says, here's the what that we need to know. Here's the why we want to focus on this. Here's how I propose we get there from A, B, and C. And here's who this impacts if we do. It can be as simple as that, Mark, if you wanted to. Absolutely. Now, and that's exactly it. And it gives a little bit of a structure in this proponent too. And Jody, this is recorded. Yes, this is recorded. And once again, I'll have Mariella speak out to you right after that we are done here. I will make sure if that's the case. Okay. Excellent. So, how about I teach you 2 other cool, quick things before we get on out of here? How does that sound? Yep. And Kay, a lot of this research ties directly to DISC, emergenetics, insights. It ties a lot to that. And so let's focus in. I'm going to teach you a couple quick tricks. In your virtual meetings, if you're having virtual meetings, I'm going to teach you a few quick tricks. And this isn't from me. This is from Michael Wilkinson's The 8 Core Practice of Facilitative Leaders. Now, we've already talked about execute. This also comes into play that hitting all 4 of those quadrants is going to be huge there. So we talked about that. One of the things that I like to focus attention to is, think about this for a minute. When you're having a face-to-face meeting, are you typically one of the first ones in the room? Are you one of the first ones in the room? Brilliant. Most time, and people are going to say probably most of the time are around it because we're setting up, we're trying to get things together, we're plugging in. Now, ready for this? If you are meeting remotely, are you the first one in the meeting? I'm starting to see the answer starting to shift a little bit, and that's okay. That is a-okay. Here's what I typically do. Rule number 1, I am normally the first one in a virtual meeting, and as people come in, I greet them individually by name when they enter the call. How many of you I've said your name today? I know there's probably a couple hundred of you in here, but I've said your names quite a bit, right? Along the way. Why on earth would I do that, folks? Think about that. Why on earth would I do that? It's connection. It's personal engagement. Yes. If we want them to be more engaged, and here's another musical reference for you, it's Lauryn Hill and the Fugees. You can't run and you can't hide. I'm going to find you. If I say your name, you know that I know that you're there and that you're important and that you're valued. So that's why I'm always the first one in the meeting. And absolutely, that's Chris, exactly right. If you're going to say their name in person, we would want to do this virtually too. So I start my meetings that way by, as they hop onto the meeting, I'm going to say, Denise, great to see you. Zara, great to see you. Hey, Cindy, really good to see you. And Edward, I'll try to bring in the Beatles if I can. Give me about 30 seconds to see what I can do here, all right? So, and I'll tell you this. You know what, Edward, I got you right now. The biggest thing is before they say goodbye, you should say hello, okay? That's the biggest thing that we should be doing. How's that? All right? There you go. That was on the spot there. So, being able to ensure that you're speaking everybody's names as they come in, we would want to make sure that they themselves know that they're a part of it, that it's not you speaking at them, but they're involved in that dialogue before they begin. It's a psychological construct. The other thing that I like to do is I don't force them to have rules. But one thing that I will do is this. I will ask them, hey, real quick, just want to make sure, right? real quick, can everybody test their mics real quick? And I'll say that. And why would on earth would I have them test their mics? Hey, real quick, can we test our cameras? I just want to make sure those are working before we get in there today. Uh-oh. First thing is, now here's the thing, Eileen, I'm going to ask this as a question. Did I require them to be on camera? Or did I subtly empower them to say, we're probably going to be using this? That's a key thing. And I'm a huge fan, folks, of empower, don't require. Empower, don't require. And so I'll give you a little trick on something I do whenever I'm in meetings is before I say requiring, here's what I do. I always say this. But it was a great catch, Eileen. I love that catch. You're absolutely right on that. It gets them to pay attention to it. The idea on the reason why I like to bring this to the fold is because I want them to know. I'll play a game called The Last Thing. The last thing I would ever want is for us to have a miscommunication. The last thing I would want is for me to misunderstand something you're saying, because if we read it in a chat, how many of us have ever misread a chat or a text or an email, right? So in this case, the last thing I would want is miscommunication. So that's kind of why I encourage cameras. That's why it's kind of important to have them. You know, do we have to be on all the time, every time? No, not necessarily. But if it's important, I do want us to be on it because I don't want it. The last thing I would want is miscommunication. So I play the game The Last Thing. I love round robining. I love, once again, that individual ping ponging is a great move. One thing I use is what's called a 3 before me. So if I'm having a meeting, say, for instance, with 10 people, before I have other people, before I will communicate with one person, they'll give their idea. Before I will kick it back to me, I will say, oh, I love that. Others. And I'll say the word others twice. And the reason why is I want to spur up dialogue. That's known as a 3 before me rule, meaning I am not going to hop back into this dialogue until 3 people chime. Lastly, a couple other things that are, I'm a fan of brainstorming and breakouts. You don't have to do it, but it's starting to get a little bit of fatigue. So use those sparingly. I am a huge fan of virtual agreement. How many of you did I get you to click buttons today? Thumbs up and smiley faces. Some of you had some party hats in there too. Guess what that is? That's known as virtual agreement. Don't end a meeting and saying, how many of us are guilty on this? Ready? Any questions on this? No? All right. See you later, everybody. No, we miss out. We should say, hey, if we're all on the same board, do me a favor. Throw me a party hat, throw me something smiling, throw me something great. You're getting what's called virtual agreement. You're getting virtual agreement from them. Do not leave a meeting without virtual agreement. And then make sure you do a summary of it as well. The last thing is I only screen share when I have something to share. Sometimes we keep our screen shares up a little more than we need to. And what happens is their eyes are going to lose focus because they've already read something on the screen. All, Zara, yes, all. Virtual agreement. And I would say, Amy, there's 200 people here. And even still, I might not get it from everybody, but we know we're getting it from the consensus. So yeah, I think that's okay for large meetings is, hey, if we're on the same page, just throw me a quick thumbs up. Let me know we're good. The other thing with screen sharing is sometimes we leave it up. And what happens is they'll transfer their eyes from one screen to another. If you turn off the screen share, they'll actually redivert their attention to the people that are on the screen. So don't keep your screen share on for too long. So that's one set of tips that I think might be pretty meaningful. The second piece of tips that I'm going to talk to you about is what's called the virtual setup. And I'm going to teach you a little bit of a strategy for this. Number one, you make an impression in the first 7 to 30 seconds. And so because of that, I want to make sure that things are as clear, clean, and presentable as humanly possible. Does anybody notice why? And you'll notice I have degrees up top. I promise you, it's not because of credibility. That's a very secondary reason. Why do you think I really have those up? Why do you think I have those up? There's a little bit of background. Are you ready for this subtle nuance? Brace yourself. My head is always centered. I'm always centered. Do you notice that and I'll give you a little hint, I'm 6'6", so my head can easily cut off camera. So I always make sure my head is sitting at the bottom of my degree. That way I know I'm centered on camera. Isn't that neat? The other thing I want to show you is never have light on in the background. And I'll show you. Look what happens to my face the moment this camera turns on. Ready? Oh, man, I went Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon. See, if you've light on in the background, what ends up happening is you end up having a lot of contrast on your face. So have lighting behind you, but off camera, because then you'll glow. The last tip I want to share is this. I treat my window as if this, right? I want you to imagine your window screen has 6 windows. And that's exactly right, Krista. They show just a forehead or things like that. So that's why I'm bringing up this 6 window. Something in your background should be in the top left and top right if you can. It keeps you centered, it keeps you grounded, it keeps you level. Your head should be in the top middle. That's why you can see my head's in the top middle right now on that distance. Your chest, body, you can see I have this wonderful peach shirt on today. And so because of that, that's where my chest sits. And that's because you can see when I gesture or when I lean in, you can see if I'm engaged with leaning in or sitting back. You can see me engage with posture if I can show my chest. And then if you see where my hands are when I'm talking, my hands stay right in between windows 4 and 6. So that is how you know you're sitting centered and you're getting the most out of your online presence. With that said, I know we have about 7 or 8 minutes left. I want to make sure there's time for Q&A. What questions, comments, concerns do we have? It's a pretty jam-packed hour. Oh, and I'm seeing, so I'm seeing a question here in the Q&A, and it says, how do you find the line to make sure you're not over managing? If you're not over managing. And so this is where when we talk about not over managing, that's the difference between checking in and checking up. Make sure you're checking in on how they're doing, not what they're doing. The reason why I use 2-foot distance from the camera is so that, ready, Leslie? So that it's not like my grandmother going, is this thing on? Can you see me okay? Versus, hey, this is sitting back, right? So in this case, we have that. And so if there is book links or things that are interesting to you, it is under, I'll give you the site. It is drjasonpugh.com. That's the easiest way to get it. You would find it on Amazon and other things. I'm not trying to self-promote, but if that is there, then that's where that is. Okay. I have other questions that are, how do you tips to engage someone who's very quiet and rarely speaks up in meetings? Sarah, great question. One thing I like to say to people is, as I go through, what I will do is I will pull them aside. Oh, and it is www.drjasonpugh.com. So to answer Sarah's question, what I like to do is pull the quieter ones off to the side one-on-one and say, hey, I know you have really good ideas. I'd love to see you bring out just one. And that way we can speak to it. Or, Sarah, what you could do is you could, you got to prepare them in advance, Suzanne, exactly right. And the other thing that I like to do is if they bring up an idea outside of a meeting and then it comes up in the meeting, what I like to do is I want to make sure that I really try to say, oh, do you know what? That reminds me. Sarah had a really good idea. She brought something up to me, and Sarah, if you don't mind, I'd love to bring this up. I thought it was a great idea. And then you just include them in that dialogue. So those are a couple things. The ones that refuse to interact at all, it does start to become a discussion as to, I'm curious as to why. Be curious, not judgmental. That's a big thing, Nadine and Krista, is I always just try to say, hey, I want to make sure that I'm not missing anything. I always blame myself for it. I want to make sure I'm not missing anything. I want to make sure that something's not, it seems like, hey, this isn't something that seems useful to you. I want to just touch base and just make sure that I'm not missing anything. I always play the game, I'm not missing anything with them. And then, yes, you shift to giving them the why and giving them the credit to that contribution when they do speak up. You want to promote positive behavior. Yahira, I do. That's why I do 3 before me. That's why I do 3 before me, because it actually muffles out that devil's advocate so that they don't have as much space or oxygen in that space. Because you're encouraging, I want to hear from others. I want to hear from others. And I'm sorry if I'm not getting all the questions. I'm trying my best. These are amazing questions. How do we handle when you ask for feedback and may not get it back? Individualize the approach. Individualize the approach. I really focus on, hey, I really want to make sure that I'm doing my best for you. And so please give me feedback. It will only help me. The other book, somebody asked about the other book. That is Eikenberry and Termel. And that is The Long Distance Leader. That is their book. And just trying to cycle through, making sure I'm not missing anything. Suggestions if you have a person that wants to change everything way too fast and need to focus them back to the how. What we do is we have to teach them about the elephant. We have to teach them about the elephant, Lynette. How do you eat an elephant? And if you're like, some of you are like, oh, wait, y'all are eating elephants? I promise it's a euphemism. We have to take things one. Bingo, Emily. I love it, Suzanne. Yes, we have to take things one bite at a time. So encourage and love their enthusiasm. You have to appreciate the enthusiasm. I love how excited you are about this. I love how enthusiastic you are about this. I think that's brilliant. I just want to make sure we're taking this one bite at a time so that we're not having to change too much. That's all. They will understand. You have to appreciate the value. And I'm trying to make sure I did not miss any other questions in the last 2 minutes we have. These are great, great, great questions. Wonderful. Well, I'm going to toss the mic over to Mariella. And thank you so much. I appreciate all of you. She can be able to talk to you about that. And once again, thank you so much for your time. And I'll toss it over to her.
Awesome. Thank you, Jay. Yeah, if you guys need any more info on this, please go right ahead and visit us at newhorizons.com. But other than that, this was a lot of amazing info. We will be sharing this recording in an email with all of you after the webinar. If you wanted access to these slides, or if you wanted to go back and listen to something you missed or weren't able to attend the full session, be on the lookout for that. Other than that, thank you so much, Dr. J, and everyone enjoy the rest of your day. Bye, everyone.
Have a wonderful holiday.